Chapter 1. The Scar She Can't Explain. Lyra. I woke the way I always woke now, gasping, with a name half-formed on my tongue and no face to attach to it. The dream had been the same. Golden eyes in the dark. A voice low and ruined, saying something I could never quite hear. Fire on the edge of a forest, and someone's hands cupping my face like I was the last warm thing left in the world. Then nothing. The way a candle dies under a thumb. I sat up in the cold dawn and rubbed my wrist before I even realized I was doing it. The scar was there, of course. It had always been there. A thin silver crescent on the inside of my wrist, no bigger than a fingernail, exactly the shape of a moon halfway through its turning. Healer Brenna had told me once it was a burn from when I was a child. My mother told me it was a birthmark. My father told me not to ask. In 3 days, I would marry Alpha Cedric Thorne, the regent of the Blood Moon Kingdom and the men my pack had chosen for me before I was old enough to choose anything for myself. The wedding gown hung on the wardrobe like a ghost holding its breath. The word Alpha, when she said it about Cedric, rang inside me like a wrong bell. I rose anyway. I brushed my hair anyway. I went down to meet the men I was promised to, and the whole way there, I kept rubbing the scar on my wrist as if I could press the memory of something out of my own skin. Far away, on a ridge none of us could see from the palace windows, a wolf was watching the smoke rise from the chimneys of a kingdom that had told itself, very carefully, that he was dead. Chapter 2. The King Who Came Back from the Dead. Kale. 5 years. 5 years of cold ground, of frostbitten fingers, of biting through my own tongue to keep from screaming her name into the dark. 5 years of swallowing dirt and oaths in equal measure. 5 years of telling the men around me that we were not finished. That I was not finished. That she was not finished. And now, at last, I stood on the eastern ridge and looked down at the kingdom that had buried me alive. The Blood Moon Kingdom slept under a thin spring fog. From this height the palace was a pale wound in the dark, the same towers, the same stone, the same lantern-lit windows I had grown up beneath. Somewhere in there, a man wearing my father's crown was eating my father's bread. Somewhere in there, she was sleeping. The thought did to me what it always did. My wolf, who had not once stopped pacing in 5 years, threw himself against the inside of my ribs hard enough to make me grunt. "Easy," murmured Ash beside me. I did not look at him. I did not need to. Ronan Vex, called Ash for the color of his hair and the color of everything he had walked out of, was the only living creature who had been with me from the first night of the exile to this last one. He stood at my shoulder the way a shadow stands. He had killed 11 men for me and saved my life 4 times, and he still spoke to me like I was something fragile when no one else was listening. "She's down there, Kale," he said. "I know. Wedding in 3 days. I know. You sure you don't want to just walk in tonight and burn it?" I almost smiled. If I walk in tonight, I burn her too. Cedric has bound her to him by some trick. I can feel it from here. I pressed a hand to my chest where the bond should have been, where the bond had been, before they had tried to cut it out of both of us. It's wrong. It's a leash. If I rip it off her without preparing her, it might tear something inside her that won't grow back. Ash was quiet a moment. "So we do it your way." "We do it my way." Behind us, in the long shadow of the ridge, the fires of the Banished court flickered low. 300 men and women who had been thrown out of the kingdom by Cedric's purges. Wolves with cropped ears, witches with burned hands, omegas who had refused to be sold, alphas who had refused to bend. They had followed me into the wastes when I was 19 and hollowed out and half mad. They had made me a king out of nothing but my refusal to die. I had given them my word that we would all go home. I gave it to them again, now, in the privacy of my own skull. I stepped to the edge of the ridge and looked down at the palace where the woman I loved was being prepared like a sacrifice. The wind off the lowlands smelled of wood smoke and lilac. Once, a long time ago, that scent had meant her hair after a summer rain. "Lyra," I said. Quietly. Carefully. The way a man says a prayer when he isn't sure whether the god is listening or already dead. 3 days, Ash said behind me. 3 days, I agreed. I tipped my head back and let the howl out. It rolled down the ridge and across the lowlands and against the palace walls like a fist on a door. It would wake the cooks. It would wake the guards. It would wake the men on my father's throne, and, God's willing, it would wake one half-asleep wolf inside the chest of one half-erased Omega who didn't yet remember my name. I needed her to remember. The rest, I could do with steel. Chapter 3. The Bride of the False King. Lyra. Cedric was waiting for me in the White Hall. He always chose the White Hall for things he wanted witnessed. Cold marble, high windows, every surface designed to throw a man's voice farther than it had any right to go. He stood beneath the great stained-glass moon with his hands clasped behind his back, and when I entered he turned the way a hunter turns at the snap of a twig. "There she is," he said. Soft. Pleased. As if I were a hound he had been training. My Omega. I curtsied. The gesture had been drilled into me so deeply that my body did it before my mind decided whether to allow it. He crossed the hall in long, unhurried strides and took my hand. His was warm, dry, and far too large. He pressed his lips to my knuckles. My wolf, newly twitching awake, snarled so faintly inside me that I felt it in the soles of my feet. "You look pale," he said. "Did you sleep?" "I had a dream." "What about?" The truth, golden eyes, fire, a man calling me back from somewhere I cannot see, rose in my throat and I swallowed it whole. "I don't remember," I said. He smiled. He had a beautiful smile, Cedric Thorne. Wide and even and the exact careful shape of a smile a man practices in a mirror. "Good," he said. Something inside me went still. "Good?" He didn't notice. He never noticed when his own words slipped. He laid my hand on his arm and walked me toward the windows, and his thumb stroked the inside of my wrist in slow, possessive circles. Right over the scar. My wolf lunged. I made a small sound, and Cedric's grip tightened, and for one heartbeat I was certain he had felt it too, the wrongness, the way the bond he had tied around my heart strained against something older that was finally beginning to push back. His pupils flared. The careful smile faltered. Then he was Cedric again. Polished. Gentle. Wrong. "There were rumors this morning," he said. "Of a wolf at the gates. Some fool of a guard claims he heard a howl from the eastern ridge." "Did he?" "It was the wind." Cedric looked down at me. His eyes were very pale, very kind. "There is no wolf, Lyra. There has not been a wolf on that ridge for years. Whatever they tell you, whatever the servants whisper, you will remember that." "Yes." "Yes," I said. Because it was the safest word. "Good girl," he said. And kissed the scar on my wrist as if he were sealing it shut. Inside me, my wolf did not go back to sleep. She paced. Chapter 4. A Wolf at the Gate. Kale. Ash slipped down the ridge an hour before dawn with a bundle wrapped in oilcloth and a knife between his teeth. I did not watch him go. I never did. Watching only made my hands itch for a weapon I had already given to him. He came back at first light with blood on his sleeve that wasn't his and a grin he was trying not to show. "Done. Done," he said. "Right on the inside of the main gate. Where the captain of the watch will trip on it before the first bell. They'll be screaming inside the hour. And the guard. He'll live. He'll just have a story to tell about the shadow that knocked him out and bowed to him before climbing back over the wall." I almost smiled. Ash had a sense of theater I had never been able to talk him out of. It was, I had decided long ago, one of the reasons we were still alive. We watched the sun crawl up the back of the kingdom. Somewhere down there, in a few minutes, a guard captain would step on a small black bundle of wolf fur tied with a strip of leather and weighted with a single iron coin stamped with my father's crest. The blood moon sigil. The mark of the line they had sworn was extinct. It would say, without a word, "I am here. I am alive. I know what you did." It would put the false king's hand on a sword by breakfast. Good. A man who reaches for a sword too early is a man who has already begun losing. Chapter 5. The Stranger in the Garden. Lyra. By dusk, the palace was a hive someone had kicked. The captain of the watch had been seen running across the inner courtyard with a small black bundle in his hand. A serving girl had fainted near the east kitchens and refused to say why. Cedric had locked himself in council with 3 of his alpha lords and had not come out, even for the supper bell. Mira found me in the long gallery, pretending to read. "Garden," she said under her breath. "Now. Before they remember to put another guard on you." "Why?" "Because you have been pacing in here like a caged animal for 2 hours and I would rather you do it where the walls don't have ears." She was right. I went. The night gardens were the only place in the palace I had ever felt almost alone. Old roses, half wild, pressed up against crumbling walls. A reflecting pool the moon took for itself. A single bench under a willow whose roots had cracked the stone 2 centuries ago and were never replaced. I sat on the bench and tipped my head back and closed my eyes. Inside me, my wolf was still pacing. I did not hear him come. I felt him. A breath of warmth between my shoulder blades. The almost imperceptible weight of someone standing exactly where they should not have been able to stand without snapping a twig. The hair on my arms lifted before I had a name for what was lifting it. "Don't scream," said a voice behind me. Low. Ruined. Careful as a hand on a wound. I didn't. I could not have explained why. "Turn around very slowly," he said. "I will not touch you. I swear it." I turned. He was tall. Taller than Cedric. Cloaked and hooded in the mottled black and gray of someone who had spent a long time in places where being seen could kill you. The hood shadowed most of his face, but his eyes. His eyes. Gold. The gold of my dream. The gold of the voice in the dark. The gold of every time I had woken up reaching for someone who wasn't there. My wolf threw herself against the inside of my ribs so hard I gasped. He saw it. I watched him see it. Watched the careful shape of his mouth break for half a second into something almost too painful to look at. "Lyra," he said. He said my name the way Cedric never said it. Not as a possession. As a prayer that had been waiting 5 years for permission to be spoken. "I don't," my voice came out wrong. "I don't know you." "I know," he said. "I know you don't. Not yet." "Who are you?" He took a slow breath. The kind of breath a man takes before he decides not to bleed in front of someone. "I am the man," he said quietly, "they told you to forget." A door slammed somewhere inside the palace. Voices. Boots on stone. Guards. His head came up like a wolf's. "I will come back," he said. "I will come back, and I will not ask you to remember me all at once. I will ask you to remember one small thing at a time. Until you remember enough to choose." "Choose what?" He looked at me as if I were the last warm thing left in the world. "Whether to come home," he said. And then he was gone, and I was alone on the bench under the willow, and my wolf was awake, and my wrist was burning, and somewhere in my chest, a door that had been bricked shut for 5 years had just heard a knock from the other side. Chapter 6. What the Omega Forgot. Lyra. I did not sleep. I lay in the dark with my hand pressed over the scar on my wrist, and I let the dreams come without fighting them. A forest at dusk. Wet leaves. A boy of maybe 17 with golden eyes pressing me up against a tree, laughing softly into my hair, his hand on the small of my back. "Stop wriggling, Omega, or I'll never get this clasp open." A summer field. Lying on my back. The same boy, older now, propped on one elbow above me, tracing the line of my collarbone like he was memorizing it for a test he knew was coming. "If anything ever happens. If anyone ever takes me from you. You remember this. You remember me. Promise." The cliff where the kingdom ended and the wastes began. Wind. Soldiers. The boy taller, a man, blood on his mouth, kneeling because they had made him kneel, his eyes locked on mine across a courtyard full of spears. "Whatever they do to you, Lyra. Whatever they make you forget. Find your way back to me." A small dark room. A woman in a hooded robe with shaking hands. "I am sorry, child. I am so sorry. He has my daughter. He says he will burn her in front of me if I do not do this." A pain like a knife in the inside of my skull. A scream. Mine. I sat up in bed with my hand clamped over my mouth and tears streaming silently down my face. I knew his name now. I did not know it the way you know a word. I knew it the way a wolf knows the smell of her own pup. Kale. I whispered it into the dark, and inside me, my wolf stopped pacing and lay down at last like a creature that has finally been allowed to come home. Chapter 7. The Beast Court. Kale. The camp called itself the Beast Court because the men who built it had been called beasts long before they had been allowed to call themselves anything else. It sat in a hollow between three ridges, hidden from the lowlands by a fold in the land and from the sky by the canopy of an old forest that the kingdom maps had stopped marking 3 generations ago. There were tents and there were lean-tos, there were forge fires and cook fires and the low constant murmur of 300 people who had nothing left to lose and had decided, very deliberately, to lose it together. When I came down off the ridge they all stopped what they were doing. They always did. I had given up trying to make them stop. Ash walked at my left. On my right, half a step behind, came Kira, old Selah's daughter, 18 now, with her mother's gray eyes and her mother's stubborn mouth and none of her mother's patience. She had been 12 when Cedric took Selah. She had grown up in this camp on a diet of grief and fury in my promises. Status, I said. Sigil delivered, Ash said. Garrison doubled at the east gate by midday. Cedric called council. Council went past supper. He has not slept. He has sent 2 riders north, 1 south. He is afraid. Good. Lyra. Kira's voice was careful. She walked in the gardens at dusk. Alone. She came back inside changed. I stopped walking. Changed how? My mother used to say it like this. Kira looked up at me. Her gray eyes were the only soft thing about her. She used to say there is a moment where a woman who has been told a long lie remembers, in her body, that she has been lied to. Before her mind catches up. Lyra walked into the garden still asleep. She came back awake. My breath went out of me in a long, shaking thread. She remembers? Not all of it. Not yet. But the wolf is up. The bond is straining. By the wedding it will be tearing at her from the inside, and Cedric will know, and he will move. How long? 2 days. 3 at most. I closed my eyes. 2 days. 2 days to give her back enough of herself that when the moment came, when the false king reached for her in front of the whole court, she would have the spine to refuse him. All right. I opened my eyes. The whole camp was watching me. 300 ruined faces in firelight. Listen to me, all of you. We have been ready for 5 years. We are ready now. In 2 nights we move. Tomorrow night I go in for her. If I come back with her, we ride for the kingdom at dawn. If I do not come back, I let the silence hold. If I do not come back, you will take her out anyway. Even if she is screaming. Even if she does not yet remember why. You take her out and you keep her alive. Promise me. We promise, Beast King, said Ash. We promise, Beast King, said Kira. We promise, Beast King, said 300 voices in the hollow between the ridges, and the sound rolled up the hills and out toward the kingdom like the beginning of a tide. Chapter 8. The Touch That Burned. Lyra. The feast was the worst night of my life. I had attended worse. I had attended my mother's funeral. I had attended the night Cedric was named regent. I had attended the strange bloodless ceremony, 3 years ago, where I had stood in front of the council and signed my name to a betrothal contract I could barely read through the headache that had not left me for a week. But this night, with my wolf awake and a name burning in my mouth and the false bond around my heart pulled so tight it hurt to breathe, this night was worse. Cedric had me on his arm. The White Hall was full of alpha lords and their wives. The long tables groaned with food no one was eating. Musicians played something soft and dull in the corner because Cedric did not like loud music, did not like dancing, did not like anything that made it harder for him to hear the room. Halfway through the second course, the herald struck the floor with his staff. Lord Cain of the Northern Reaches, he announced. Bearing gifts for the regent and his bride. Heads turned. I turned with them, slowly, because I had been moving slowly all night, the way a woman moves when she is trying not to wake the wolf inside her own chest. A tall man in dark green came down the aisle. Hood thrown back. Hair black as wet stone. A short, neatly trimmed beard that had not been there in any of my dreams. A scar high on one cheekbone I did not recognize. But the eyes. Gold. My fingers tightened on Cedric's arm. Cedric, oblivious, smiled the careful smile. Lord Kane. You honor us. The Northern Reaches have not sent a representative to this court in some years. The Reaches have been quiet, my lord, said Lord Kane, in a voice that vibrated the air half an inch in front of my face. We thought it wise, given the news, to come and pay our respects to your bride. He bowed. Slow. Deep. Court perfect. When he straightened, he looked at me. Only at me. My lady, he said. Cedric's hand pressed warningly into the small of my back. I dropped a curtsy because my body remembered how, and Lord Kane, Kale, oh moon, Kale, stepped forward and took my hand to bow over it. His lips brushed the inside of my wrist. The scar. The world went white. It was not a memory. It was not a flood of memories. It was him. The whole of him. The smell of pine and wood smoke and something darker underneath that I had not let myself name in 5 years because the name was home. The exact pressure of his thumb against the bone of my wrist. The way his breath caught when he was trying very hard not to take more than was offered. My wolf rose inside me like a wave breaking in slow motion. I swayed. He held my hand a heartbeat longer than was proper. His eyes burned into mine over the bow. My lady looks faint, he said. Perhaps she should sit. She is fine, said Cedric, too quickly. Of course, said Kale, and let go. I sat. I sat very, very carefully. I kept my face the bland shape it had worn for 5 years, and I did not look at the men in dark green again for the rest of the night, because if I looked at him I would burn the entire Whitehall to the ground. Inside me, my wolf threw back her head and howled, and for the first time since I was 19, I let her. Quietly. Inside. Where Cedric, drinking his wine, smiling his careful smile, could not yet hear. Chapter 9. The Witch in the Cellar. Lyra. I waited until the third watch, when even Cedric finally slept, and then I went down. I did not know I knew the way until my feet were already taking me. Down the servants' stair. Past the wine cellar. Past the cold room. Down the narrow stone steps that the cook said led only to the old foundations, the ones from before the kingdom was a kingdom, the ones nobody used. A torch in a bracket. I took it. A door. I had never seen this door before in my life, and yet my hand closed on the bolt as if I had drawn it 100 times. It opened. The room beyond was small and round and smelled of damp stone and dried herbs. In the center, on a low pallet, sat a woman in a hooded gray robe. Her hands were folded in her lap. They were the hands of an old woman, knotted at the knuckles. Pale ropes of scar tissue ran across the backs of them as if someone had once tied her wrists too tight for too long. She lifted her head when the torchlight touched her. Her eyes were gray. Kira's eyes, though I did not yet know to think of them that way. You came, she breathed. Who are you? Sayla, she said. I am the witch the regent keeps in his cellar, and I am the woman who took your memories from you, child, and I have been waiting 5 years to tell you I am sorry. I stood very still. I did not weep. I did not scream. I had done my weeping, silently, into a pillow upstairs an hour ago. I had nothing left to spend on her. Tell me his name, I said. Her ruined hands lifted slightly, as if she could not quite believe she was being permitted to say it. Kale, she said. Kale Draven. The last son of the Blood Moon line. The boy you loved before they made me cut him out of you. He is alive, child. He is alive, and he has come home. I closed my eyes. I let the name settle into the place inside me where it had always belonged. Tell me everything, I said. Chapter 10. The Marking. Cedric did not give me time. I should have known. He had not been a careful man for nothing. I came back from the cellar in the gray hour before dawn, and Mira was already at my door with her face white and her eyes wide. He's calling court, she whispered. Now. He says it cannot wait until the wedding. He says you are to be marked publicly this morning. Marked. A claiming bite. In front of the lords. He's framing it as a gesture of devotion. Bringing the wedding bond forward. The whole court will witness it. My wolf snarled. So. He had felt it after all. The scar burning at the feast. The way Lord Cain had bowed. He had not put the pieces together yet, perhaps. But he had felt the bond around my heartstring, and like any man holding a leash, his first instinct was to pull harder. I took Myra's hands. They were shaking. I made my own be still. Get word to Lord Cain, I said. Tell him whatever you have to tell him to get past his men. Tell him the regent is moving early. Tell him Selah said the witch's bargain holds, the bite will not bind a wolf already bound elsewhere. Tell him exactly that. She stared at me. Lyra, what are you? Tell him, I said. Go. Now. She went. I went down to the White Hall in my wedding eve gown, with the scar on my wrist burning like a coal, and I let Cedric Thorne take me by the throat in front of his entire court and bend my neck back and sink his teeth into the place where the mating bite belongs. It hurt. It hurt the way a wrong thing always hurts. It did not bind. I felt it not bind. I felt his bond try to seal itself into me, and I felt something deeper, something older, something that smelled like pine and wood smoke and home, rise up inside me and refuse it. A wolf already bound elsewhere. A bond already sworn. 5 years of forgetting could not undo what had been written into us under that summer field when we were 17. His teeth came out of my neck. He licked the blood from his lips and smiled the careful smile. He did not yet know. The court applauded politely. I stood beside him with his bloodprint on my throat and my eyes lowered, and I let him think he had won, and inside me, my wolf and I began very quietly to plan how we were going to kill him. Chapter 11. Steal her back. Kale. Mira found Ash in the lower market with a message that nearly stopped my heart. The regent is marking her this morning. The witch says the bite will not bind a wolf already bound elsewhere. I read it 3 times. My hand was shaking so badly Ash had to steady the parchment. He bit her, I said. He tried. Ash's voice was very careful. Selah is right. The old bond holds. You and Lyra were promised to each other under the mating moon when you were boys and girls. That kind of bond does not unmake itself. It only sleeps. He put his teeth in her, Ash. I know. He put his teeth in her. I know, Kale. Ash did not flinch. He never flinched. And tonight you are going to put your hands on her face, and you are going to give her back enough of herself that tomorrow she walks out of that palace and lets us burn it. That is the only revenge that matters. The other kind we can take with steel later. I pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes until I saw light. Then I lifted my head. Tonight, I said. Her balcony. Tonight, Ash agreed. And Kale. What? When you see her. Try not to weep. It frightens her when you weep. She told me that, in the old days. She said you had a face that should not weep. I almost laughed. I'll try, I said. I did not try very hard. When I came over her balcony rail at moonrise that night and she turned from the window with her hand over the bandage on her throat and her eyes bright with terror and recognition and rage, I dropped to one knee in front of her and I wept the way a man weeps who has not been allowed to weep in 5 years. She did not flinch. She came to me. She put her hands on my face. Kale, she whispered. Lyra. Kale. Lyra. We said each other's names back and forth until the air in the room remembered the shape of them, and then she sank to her knees in front of me and pressed her forehead to mine, and the bond between us, which had been bricked up for 5 years, opened one tiny crack in the wall, and a single beam of warmth came through. Chapter 12. One memory. Lyra. He held my face like it was the last warm thing left in the world. I am going to give you one memory, he said. His voice was wrecked. Only one. Selah said the rest must come back slowly or it will break you. Tell me when you are ready. Now. Lyra. Now, Kale. He closed his eyes. He pressed his thumb against the scar on my wrist. He whispered something under his breath that was older than any tongue I had been taught. And then it was summer. I was 17. He was 17. We were in the meadow above the eastern ridge, and he had pulled me down onto my back into the grass, and he was propped on one elbow above me tracing the line of my collarbone with his fingertip like he was memorizing it for a test he knew was coming. If anything ever happens, he was saying. If anyone ever takes me from you. You remember this. You remember me. Promise. I promise, I heard myself say, in the voice of a girl I had not been allowed to be for 5 years. The meadow bent the light. The bond between us flared like a candle suddenly given air. He kissed me. In the meadow, and in the room, and in every place in between. I came back to myself with my forehead against his and my hands in his hair and tears on both our faces and my wolf running in tight, mad, joyful circles inside my chest. I remember you, I said. I know. I remember us. I know. Kale, they made me forget you. I know, my love. I know. And now we are going to make them very sorry. A bell rang somewhere down the corridor. Footsteps. Cedric's voice. Kale cursed under his breath and rose. He pulled me up after him and pressed a hard, fast kiss to my forehead. Tomorrow, he said. When he calls court for the wedding feast. When he stands you up beside him in front of the lords and asks you if you take him as your alpha. You say no. Loud. Clear. In front of everyone. And we will be at the gates. Kale. Promise me. I promise. He went over the balcony like a shadow going home. I stood in my room with my hand on my wrist and my wolf wide awake and the false bond around my heart fraying in long, satisfying threads. Tomorrow. Tomorrow I was going to ruin a king. Chapter 13. The False Bond. Lyra. In the morning the false bond knew. I felt it the moment I opened my eyes. A tightness around my chest, like a hand had closed itself over my heart in the night and was now testing how much it dared to squeeze. Cedric's bond. The leash he had tied to me through the witch's stolen ritual. It had felt nothing for 5 years because there had been nothing inside me for it to react to. Now there was. Now there was Kale. I lay very still and let the leash test me. It pulled. It pinched. It tried, in its small clever way, to tug me out of bed and down the corridor and into Cedric's rooms, where he would no doubt be sitting with his careful smile and his cup of morning wine, ready to ask me very gently what was wrong with his bride. I let it pull. I did not move. I closed my eyes and reached, instead, for the other thing inside me. The older thing. The summer field. The boy with golden eyes. The bond Selah had cut and Cedric had buried and Kale had, last night, with one memory and one kiss, dug back up. The old bond hummed under my breastbone. The new one strained against it. I let them pull against each other for a long, considering moment, and I learned something useful. The false bond was strong, but it was new. It had no roots. It had been laid over me in a hurry by a man who had been afraid of running out of time. The old bond was not new. The old bond had grown into me when I was a girl, the way an oak grows into a hill. You cannot take an oak out of a hill in one afternoon, no matter how careful your knife. Cedric had not taken the oak out of the hill. He had only buried it under a stone and hoped no one would notice the roots. Mira knocked. Came in with breakfast, with my dress for the day, with eyes that asked 100 questions she was too disciplined to say out loud. "How are you?" she said. Not a question. A code. "I am awake," I said. Not an answer. A code. She nearly burst into tears and turned away to lay out my clothes so I would not see. I ate. I dressed. I went down to the morning cord on Cedric's arm with the bandage still on my throat, and when he looked into my eyes for any flicker of the night strain, I gave him the same blank, biddable face I had worn for 5 years. I let the false bond feel obedient. I let the old bond stay quiet under it like a wolf in tall grass. He smiled the careful smile. He was going to be so sorry. Chapter 14. The Prince They Buried. Lyra. I went back to Selah that afternoon. I told the guards at the lower stair that I had a charity to perform among the prisoners, that the wedding made me wish to be merciful, that I would be back within the hour. They looked at the bandage on my throat and they did not stop me. They had seen Cedric put his teeth into me that morning and they had decided, sensibly, that I was no longer something worth questioning. Sayla was waiting. I do not have much time, I said. Tell me the rest. She told me. She told me how Kale's father, the old Blood Moon King, had died of a fever that was probably not a fever. How Cedric, his cousin, had been named regent because Kale was 19 and grieving and not yet ready for the crown. How Cedric had used that single year of regency to spread coin and fear and quiet rumor through every corner of the court. How, by the time anyone realized he meant to keep the throne, half the Alpha Lords were already his. She told me how Kale had been taken in the night. Charged with a treason he had not committed. Beaten, in front of a courtyard full of spears, on his knees in front of me, while I screamed. She told me how Cedric had come to her after, when the ravens reported Kale had survived the wastes. How he had pressed a knife to her daughter Kira's throat in front of her, Kira, 12 years old, weeping, not understanding, and said, "You will go into the Omega's mind and you will take the prince out of it, and you will leave nothing behind but a wedding date." She told me how she had done it. She told me how she had saved one thread. One thread, child. I could not take you out of him. The old bond was already too deep, and I would not have, even if I could. But I left you, a small thing. A scar shaped like a moon halfway through its turning. I left you a door he could knock on if he ever found you. I am old, child, and I am a coward, but I am not a monster. Her gray eyes filled. I am sorry. 4 or 5 years. I am sorry. I knelt in front of her. I took her ruined hands and I kissed the rope scars on her knuckles. Tonight, I said, when the gates burn, you walk out of this cellar with me. Kira is upstairs in our camp, alive, 18, waiting for you. She made a sound I will not try to describe. Tonight, she said. Chapter 15. The Choice. Lyra. The wedding feast was set for sundown. By mid-afternoon, Cedric came to my chambers. He did not knock. He never knocked. He walked in as if every door in the palace were a door he had paid for, which, in a way, was true. He had a guard at his shoulder and a sword on his hip. He had not worn a sword in his own palace in 3 years. The careful smile was gone. Lyra, he said. My lord. Sit. I sat. He stood over me. The guard closed the door behind him. The bond around my heart tightened experimentally, I let it pull. I had a strange morning, he said. I had a strange night. The bond between us has been uneven since yesterday. A bond of our kind should not be uneven so soon. It tells me you are thinking thoughts I have not given you permission to think. I lowered my eyes. I am tired, my lord. The mark you gave me this morning. Don't, he said. Soft. Almost kind. Don't lie to me, Omega. I have been a patient man with you. I have been a generous man. I have given you a kingdom for a bride price. I will not be made a fool of in my own white hall. I would not. Lord Cain, he said. I went still. Lord Cain of the northern reaches, Cedric said, does not exist. We checked. I had 3 men ride before dawn. The northern reaches sent no one. No Cain. No Reach Lord. No green cloak. He watched me. So, he said. The question is who bowed over my bride's hand at my own feast last night. The question is whose lips brushed her wrist while I drank my wine. The question is what name you have been whispering in your sleep that you did not whisper for 5 years. He drew the sword. He set the tip of it, very lightly, against the underside of my chin. Tonight at the feast, he said, I will stand you up before the lords and I will ask you, in front of all of them, whether you take me as your alpha. You will say yes. You will smile. You will sound as if no one has ever asked you a kinder question. Do you understand me, Omega? The bond around my heart pulled. The old bond, deeper, pulled back. I lifted my eyes to his over the blade. Yes, my lord, I said. He held the sword there a moment longer, watching my face, and then he lowered it and laughed, and the laugh was not careful any more. It was the laugh of a man who had decided that laughing was easier than wondering whether he had begun to lose. Good girl, he said. He left. I sat very still until the door clicked shut, and then I bent forward over my own knees and breathed, slow and deep, 3 times, 4 times, 5. He had given me my opening himself. He had told me exactly when he intended to ask the question. I would say no. In front of all of them. And by the time he understood, the gates would already be burning. Chapter 16. The Omega who said no. Lyra. The White Hall had never looked whiter. Every lantern was lit. Every banner was hung. The musicians played the soft dull music Cedric liked, and the tables were full, and the Alpha Lords were in their best, and at the head of the hall, on the dais my father had once stood on at his own wedding, Cedric Thorne stood with his hand out for mine. I walked the length of the hall on my own. He had wanted Mira to walk me. I had told him, sweetly, that I wished to come to him myself. He had liked that. Of course he had liked that. I came up onto the dais. I put my hand into his. The bond around my heart flared its leash pole. The old bond, under it, thrummed steady and warm and patient as a creature that has waited 5 years and can wait 5 more if needed. He turned us to face the Lords. Tonight, he began, in his beautiful voice, we end an old story and begin a new one. Tonight my Omega and I take the bond before all of you, in light, as our customs demand. A murmur of approval. Cups raised. Lyra Vale, Omega of the Blood Moon, he said, very kindly, very loudly, do you take me, Cedric Thorne, as your alpha, your mate, and your king, before this court and under this moon, of your own free will, with your wolf and your heart and your name? A heartbeat. I let it stretch. I let the Lords lean forward. I let the false bond around my heart squeeze, expecting the yes. I lifted my chin. No, I said. The White Hall did not breathe. What? Said Cedric. The careful smile was a thing of paint and it cracked. Lyra. Lyra. I do not take you, I said. I said it loud. I said it to the whole hall. I do not take you as my alpha. I do not take you as my mate. I do not take you as my king. You are not my alpha. You are not my mate. You are not my king. You are the men who buried my prince and stole my kingdom and put a witch's knife in my mind, and I refuse you. Before this court. Under this moon. With my wolf and my heart and my name. The leash around my heart screamed. I tore it. I felt it go. A hot thread of pain, then cold, then nothing. The false bond fell off me like a wet rag falling off a shoulder. Inside me, my wolf threw back her head and howled. Cedric's face changed. It was not a face I had ever seen on him before. Guards, he said. The doors at the far end of the White Hall blew open. Not by guards. By Kale. He came down the aisle the way fire comes down a forest. Black cloak, golden eyes, sword in one hand and the whole banished court behind him, Ash on his right and Kira on his left and 100 ruined faces at his back. The court rose. The Lords drew swords. The musicians dropped their instruments and ran. Kale did not stop walking until he was at the foot of the dais. He looked up at me. I looked down at him. He held out his hand. My queen, he said. I stepped over Cedric's outstretched arm and took it. Chapter 17. The Escape. Kale. The White Hall went up in noise. I had her behind me in the same heartbeat. I did not need to look at her to know where she was. The old bond, finally unbricked, hummed her exact location into the bones of my back. Lyra. 2 steps behind me. Wolf awake. Heart steady. Hand resting between my shoulder blades like she was reminding me that I was real. Ash and Kira moved to flank her. Cedric came off the dais with his sword already swinging. I caught his blade on mine and the shock of it ran up my arm into my teeth. He was strong. I had forgotten how strong. 5 years of feasts and lying had not softened him as much as I wanted them to have. You are dead, he hissed in my face. I killed you. You tried. I will try again. You will not have time. I kicked him in the chest. He stumbled. Ash put a knife in the Alpha Lord coming up on my left and Kira put her teeth, half-shifted, into the wrist of the captain coming up on my right. The banished court hit the White Hall like a wave, and the Alpha Lords, who had been Cedric's men only as long as Cedric had looked like winning, broke and ran or stood and died according to the courage they had. I shouldered Cedric back into his own dais and grabbed Lyra's hand and ran. We went out through the side door, the servant's way, the way I had run with her when we were 16 and stealing apples from the kitchen. She knew it. She knew it because last night I had given her one memory and she had begun digging for the rest on her own. Her feet remembered before her mind did. At the cellar stair I shouted, "Selah," and the witch came up out of the dark with her grey hood thrown back and her ruined hands raised, and Kira, behind us, made a sound like a child being given back her mother and threw herself into Selah's arms in the middle of a battle. We went out through the lower kitchen. Through the herb garden. Through the postern in the old wall. Horses waited, held by two of Ash's men. I lifted Lyra into the saddle in front of me. The Banished court came pouring out of the postern behind us in a flood of cloaks and steel, and from the white hall behind them, the first orange flicker of fire began to climb the windows. I looked back once. Cedric Thorne stood in his own broken doorway with his sword in his hand and blood on his mouth, watching us go. He was screaming something. The wind ate the words. Good. I dug my heels in. The horse leapt. Lyra's hand closed over mine on the reins. "Home, Kale," she said. "Home," I agreed. We rode. Chapter 18. The Banished Court Bows. Lyra. We rode through the night and we rode through the morning, and a little after noon on the second day, the horse came up over a fold of land and there it was, the hollow between the three ridges. The old, old forest. The forge fires. The lean-tos. The 300 ruined faces of the beast court. They saw us coming from a long way off. By the time we reached the camp, they were lined up along the path. Every one of them. Men with cropped ears. Witches with burned hands. Omegas with the brand marks of packhouses that had thrown them away. Alphas with the eyes of men who had been told, once, to kneel, and had decided once was enough. Kale drew rein. He swung down. He lifted me down after him as gently as if I were made of paper. He turned me by the shoulders to face the camp. "This is Lyra," he said. He did not say it loud. He did not need to. She is who I told you about. She is who we have been waiting for. She has been hurt. She has been forgotten. She has been forced to forget. She has come home anyway. The silence in the hollow was the silence of 300 people not breathing. "Bow," Kale said. They went down. Every one of them. Every cropped-eared wolf. Every burned-handed witch. Every brand-marked Omega. Every refused to kneel Alpha. Down on one knee in the dirt of the hollow with their heads bowed and their hands open at their sides. I had been a thing for 5 years. I had been a contract. A bride price. A leash end. A signature on a betrothal nobody let me read. I had not been bowed to since I was 19. Kale's hand was warm and steady at the small of my back. I lifted my chin. "Thank you," I said. My voice did not shake. "Get up. Please. All of you. Get up." They got up. A woman near the front, small, gray-haired, a brand on the side of her neck, was crying without making any noise. A young Alpha behind her had his fist pressed against his mouth. Ash, at Kale's other shoulder, was looking at me with a small, exhausted smile that was the nearest thing to soft I had seen on his face since I had met him. Kale leaned down. His lips brushed my temple. "Welcome home, Omega," he said. I closed my eyes. I let myself, for one whole heartbeat, be home. Chapter 19. The Wolf Returns. Lyra. I shifted that night for the first time in 5 years. Selah said it would be easier if I did it before sleep, while the old bond was still humming. Kale said he would walk with me into the trees. Ash said he would walk 3 paces behind us with his back turned, because there were things a Wolf King did for his Omega that did not need an audience, and because an audience was, however turned around, still an audience. We went into the old, old forest. Just the 3 of us, and Ash 3 paces behind with his back politely turned. I shrugged off my cloak. I looked at Kale. He was already half-shifted, golden eyes brighter than the moon, the long muscles of his arms pulled tight under his skin. He was waiting. He was not going to push me. He was not going to do anything until I told him to. "Help me," I said. He came to me. He pressed his forehead to mine. He laid his hand flat over my chest, over my heart, over the place where the false bond had been and where the old bond was now thrumming so loudly I could hear it in my teeth. "Let her up, my love," he said. "She has been waiting." I let her up. She came. It hurt. It hurt the way a long-held breath hurts when you finally let it out. Bone shifting. Skin turning. The world contracting, lengthening, coloring itself in scents I had not been able to smell for 5 years, pine resin, wood smoke, him, oh, him, the warm dark woolen smell of mate, my mate, alive, here, real. I came down on 4 paws in the moss. I was gray. Pale gray, with a slash of cream along one ear. Smaller than him by a head. He was black. He was always black, my wolf prince. Black as wet stone. Black as the night before dawn. He stood over me a moment and then he tucked his head down under my jaw and he made a sound I had never heard a wolf make, a low, broken, grateful sound, and I licked the side of his face because I had no words and because, in that shape, I did not need any. We ran. We ran until the sun was a rumor. We ran until my legs remembered what legs were for. We ran until the old bond between us, after 5 years of being bricked up and silent, finally laid itself down in our chests like an animal coming home to its own hearth. When we came back, Ash, 3 paces behind, was sitting on a stump with his eyes determinately on a tree, and there were tears dried on his cheeks he did not bother to wipe away. Chapter 20. The Bond Reforged. Kale. We had 2 days before the war. 2 days for the Banished court to ready itself. 2 days for messengers to ride. 2 days for me to put my hand on Lyra's face and learn it again, a piece at a time, because 5 years had taken her face away from me as surely as it had taken me away from hers. I used them well. We slept in my tent. The first night we did not touch each other beyond the holding of hands. We lay on our sides face to face in the dark and we whispered, and she gave me back the years she had lost, and I gave her back the years I had lost, and somewhere between midnight and dawn we both began crying without noticing it, because grief is a thing you do not always know you are doing. The second night she put her hand on my chest and said, "Tell me what you did, in the wastes, on the worst night." So I told her. I told her about the winter we had eaten the leather off our boots. About the night I had held a dying boy in my arms in a snowbank because none of us could carry him further, and he had asked me to tell him a story, and I had told him about her, about the meadow above the ridge. About the night Esh had walked into camp with his face open from temple to jaw and said, "I think I am dying, Beast King," and I had stitched him back together with sinew and prayer because we had no thread. She did not flinch. She had grown up since I had seen her last. She had been carrying her own dark. When I was done she pulled my forehead down against hers and she said, "I am here now." I broke a little. I had not broken once in the wastes. Not in 5 years. Not when the cold killed my second-in-command. Not when I cut my own arm to feed the orphan we found half-buried near the southern pass. I broke that night, in my own tent, with her hand on the side of my face. She held me through it. She did not try to stop the breaking. She knew, somehow, that the breaking was not the end of me but the beginning. That a man who has been frozen for 5 years has to thaw, and thawing hurts, and it is a wound only she could be the witness of. When the worst of it passed she lay back down beside me and pulled my arm across her waist and tucked her head under my jaw the way her wolf had tucked under mine in the moss, and she said, "Sleep, my king." I slept. For the first night in 5 years I slept all the way through. Chapter 21. Myra's Message. Lyra. Mira came riding into camp on the morning of the 3rd day on a horse she had stolen, with a cut along her cheek and a sealed letter tucked into the breast of her dress. I came running. "You absolute idiot," I said. I was crying. I was hugging her. I was both. "You absolute, beautiful idiot, you should have stayed down, you should have stayed in the kitchens, you should have." "Lyra," she said. She was holding me back at arm's length with that sharp Mira look. "Listen. You can yell at me later. Listen. Cedric is calling the levies. He has sent ravens to every Alpha Lord who didn't run from the White Hall. He's calling it a heresy. He's calling Kale a usurper. He's calling you," she swallowed, "you a witch's pawn. He has half the lords already. He has the Iron Reach. He has the marshlands. He is gathering them at Stonefell by the next moon. How long? 8 days. Maybe 9. Kale was already at my elbow. He had come the moment her horse cleared the ridge. He took the letter Mira was holding out and broke the seal and read, and his face did not change, but his hand on my shoulder tightened. "Stonefell," he said. "He'll fortify it. He's not stupid. He'll wait for us there and try to bleed us against the walls until our exiles lose their nerve. Will they?" He looked at me. His golden eyes were very calm. "No," he said. I believed him. Ash came up at his shoulder, and Kira at mine, and Mira between us with her cut cheek and her stolen horse and her terrible courage, and we all turned together to look at the camp, at the 300 ruined faces, at the little children who had grown up in this hollow and never seen a kingdom. 8 days, Kale said. 8 days, Ash agreed. 8 days, I said. Then we go home properly. Chapter 22. The War Council. Kale. We sat in the council tent with maps and we argued like dogs. Ash wanted a feint at the marshlands to draw a third of Cedric's strength south. Kira wanted to send Sayla ahead to undo, one by one, the small bindings Cedric had laid on the Alpha Lords who were not yet sure of him. Mira, who had no business being in a war council and also no intention of being anywhere else, wanted to ride back into the palace alone and poison the wine. I let them argue. Lyra sat beside me. She had not yet spoken. She had her hand on the map, her finger resting on the small cross mark that meant Stonefell. When the argument ran itself out, she lifted her head. "I want to fight," she said. The tent went still. "Lyra," I started. "Don't." She did not look angry. She looked, in fact, the calmest she had looked in the 3 days I had had her back. "Don't, Kale. You promised me, last night, that you would not be the kind of alpha who tries to put me in a cellar to keep me safe. You have just gotten me out of a cellar. I will not be put in another one. Even by you." "I did promise that," I said. "You did." Ash, across the table, was hiding a smile. "All right," I said. "You fight. But you fight at my side. Not in the front. Not in the back. At my side. Bond distance." "Bond distance," she agreed. "And you wear the gray leather Ash had made for you." "I will." "And if I tell you to run, I stopped, because she was already looking at me. "You will not run." "No." I exhaled. "Right," I said. "At my side, then." "Bond distance." "With your teeth." "With my teeth," she said, and her wolf grinned out of her eyes for one bright instant, and the whole tent breathed easier, because the Omega Queen of the Banished Court had just declared herself a soldier, and somehow that had made the war winnable in a way it had not been 30 seconds ago. Chapter 23. The Blood Moon Rises. Kale. We rode for Stonefell on the morning of the 5th day. The Banished Court came behind us in a dark line 300 long. Wolves, witches, omegas, alphas, half-shifted children old enough to carry a knife. I had ordered the youngest left behind in the hollow with the oldest as guard. Sayla was to lead them. She had argued. I had won that one. "Someone has to be alive, Sayla, if we lose. Someone has to keep them alive." She had bowed her gray head and not argued again. Stonefell sat on a low rise above the river. Old gray walls. A moat that had been a moat once and was now a swampy ditch full of frogs. A keep at the back with a single round tower. From 3 miles out we saw the smoke of Cedric's camp on the field below the walls, and when we came over the last rise we saw his banners. Black on white. Thorn sigil. 12 houses behind him. It was less than half the kingdom. He had thought it would be more. I lifted my hand and the column halted. I rode out alone, with Lyra at my side, to the parley flag in the center of the field. Cedric came out to meet us with 2 riders behind him. He was thinner. His eyes were red at the edges. The bandage on his throat was new, and I knew, with a small dark satisfaction, that he had been losing sleep over the false bond Lyra had torn off her heart in his white hall. "Cale Draven," he said. "Cedric Thorne. You have an hour to disperse your rabble and present yourself for the heresy of treason, and we will only hang half of you. You have an hour to disperse your levies and present yourself for the murder of my father, the theft of his throne, the violation of his ward, and the unlawful binding of my mate, and I will only kill you. You are mad. I am not the one who tried to keep an oak out of a hill with a stone." He flinched. He had not expected me to know. Lyra, beside me, smiled. It was not a soft smile. "Last chance, Cedric," she said. "Step down. Open the gates of Stonefell. Walk out alive. I will allow it. I will permit it. I will be the Omega Queen who let the false king live. If you do not do this in the next breath, Cale will do what Cale does, and I will do what I do, and you will be a stain by sundown." He spat at her feet. "All right," I said. I turned my horse. I rode back to the Banished court. I lifted my sword and I let the light catch it, and I let 300 ruined faces see it catch. "For the kingdom we were thrown out of," I said. "For the kingdom we are taking back," they answered. The blood moon rose behind us as we charged. Chapter 24. The False King's Last Stand. Cale. We took the outer field in an hour. Cedric's levies were what I had thought they would be, men paid for, not men loved. They broke at the first hard push. The Iron Reach put down their swords inside 10 minutes, when their old captain saw my father's sigil on Ash's shield and remembered who had fed his children through the famine of 17. The marshlands went over to us when Mira, of all people, rode into their lines on her stolen horse and told them, in detail and at considerable volume, exactly what Cedric had done in the cellars of his own palace. By mid-afternoon we had the moat. By dusk we had the gate. By dark we had the keep, and Cedric had retreated to the round tower at the back with 20 men. I went up alone. Lyra wanted to come. I asked her, this once, to wait. "I am not asking you to keep yourself safe," I said. "I am asking you to let me have this." 5 years, Lyra. He took 5 years from us. "Let me have this." She looked at me for a long moment. She nodded. I kissed her forehead. I went up the stair. The round tower had a single chamber at the top, and Cedric was waiting in it. His 20 men had run. They had heard the Banished court coming up the stair, and they had decided, sensibly, that 20 men were not enough. He stood alone in the middle of the chamber with his sword in his hand and his back to the open window. The wind came in cold off the river. It smelled of smoke. "Cale," he said. "Cedric. You should have died in the wastes." "I know. I should have made certain." "Yes." He laughed. It was a small, broken laugh. Not the careful laugh. Not the laugh of a king. The laugh of a man who has been a king and was now realizing he had only ever rented the title. "I loved her too, you know," he said. I did not move. "I did," he said. "From the first time I saw her. 16, in the meadow, with you. You did not see me. Neither of you ever saw me. I was only the cousin then. The regent's nephew. The boy with the careful smile." He shook his head. "I knew she was yours. I have always known. The bond between you, it was so loud, Cale. So loud. And so deep. I knew the only way to have her was to take her from you, and the only way to take her from you was to take you out of her entirely. So I did. And it did not work. No." He smiled. "No, in the end, it did not. 5 years I had her at my side, and she never once looked at me the way she looks at you. Not once." He raised his sword. "Make it quick, cousin," he said. "I am tired." I made it quick. I do not write it here. It is not a thing that wants to be written. He fell. He bled out at the foot of the round tower window with the blood moon sigil reflected in his eyes from my chest. He had asked me to make it quick, and I had given him that one mercy, because in the end I was not the kind of king who dragged a kill out, and because some part of me, deeper than I wanted to admit, had pitied him. He had loved her too. He had only loved her wrong. I went down the stair. Lyra was waiting at the bottom. Her hand was on her sword. Her face was very still. I shook my head once. She closed her eyes. She took one breath. She opened them. "It's over," she said. "It's over." She came into my arms and I held her there in the broken doorway of Stonefell Keep in the Banished Court, in the courtyard, raised the blood moon banner over the round tower for the first time in 5 years. Chapter 25. The Crown of the Banished. Lyra. We rode back to the kingdom 3 days later. Word had run ahead of us. By the time we came down off the eastern ridge, the gates of the palace were open, and the Alpha Lords who had not died at Stonefell were lined up along the road in their best, and the people, the ones I had moved through for 5 years like a ghost, stood 10 deep in the streets. They threw flowers. They threw flowers, and they wept, and they shouted his name. Kale. Kale. Kale Draven, son of Aaron, last of the Blood Moon line. And then, after a while, beside it, Lyra. Lyra Vale, Omega Queen. Lyra of the Banished Court. I rode beside him with my hand in his and I cried so hard I could not see. He squeezed my fingers. "Don't fall off your horse, Omega," he said quietly. "It is a very bad omen for an Omega Queen to fall off her horse on the day of her crowning." I laughed through the tears. "Beast King," I said. "Don't make me laugh. I'll fall off worse." "All right." He did not stop making me laugh. Chapter 26. The Claiming. Kale. That night I claimed her properly. We had been bonded under the summer moon when we were 17, but a bond made between children is not the same as a bond made between a king and his queen, and the old wolves of the Banished Court would not have forgiven me if I had not done it right. We did it in the small chapel at the back of the palace gardens, the one with the willow whose roots had cracked the stone. The same garden where I had first stood behind her in the dark and said "Don't scream." The same bench. The same moon. Selah stood as our witness, Kira stood on Selah's left, Ash stood on mine, Mira stood beside Lyra with a small bouquet of summer roses that she had cut from the wall an hour ago and refused to let anyone else carry. We did it by candle. We did it in our own clothes, not in court robes. We did it with our own blood, on our own wrists, over the silver scar Selah had once drawn there and now, in front of all of us, was allowed to undraw. The scar lifted off Lyra's skin like a thread of light. It hung in the air a moment. It went out. Underneath, where the scar had been, was the true mating mark. The blood moon crescent. Black and silver, alive, hers. I bent and I kissed it. She lifted her wrist to my mouth and laid the same mark on me, and we sealed the bond, and the old bond that had been laid in a meadow when we were 17, that had been bricked up for 5 years, that had been opened a crack in a moonlit chamber and a little wider in a dark forest and a little wider still on a battlefield, finally bloomed wide open and filled the inside of both of us with the warm, woolen, wood smoke and pine smell of home. I will not write what happened after, in our own rooms, alone, that night. It is between us. Only this, I had been told to forget her, once. I had refused. I had spent 5 years refusing. And in the dark of our own bed, with her forehead pressed to mine and her hand spread flat over the new mark on my wrist, I made her one last promise. "I will never forget you again," I said. "Not in this life. Not in any life. Not if they put a knife in my mind, not if they put a knife in my heart, not if they put me in a snowbank for 5 years again. I will know your name in the dark of any cellar they ever build." "Kale," she said. "My queen. My king. My Omega. Yours. Mine." Chapter 27. The Omega he never forgot. Lyra. I woke in the morning to him already awake, watching me. The light was very soft. The window was open. The willow in the garden below was moving in the wind. He had his head on the same pillow as mine and his hand flat over the new mark on my wrist, and his golden eyes were wet, and he was smiling the kind of smile he had not been allowed to smile in 5 years. "Good morning, Omega," he said. "Good morning, Alpha. Did you sleep?" "Yes. All the way through." "All the way through." "Good." He closed his eyes a moment. "Good." I lifted my hand, the marked one, and laid it on his cheek. He leaned into it the way a wolf leans into a hand it trusts. Kale. They told you to forget me. They did. And you didn't. No. Why not? He opened his eyes. They were the same gold I had dreamed of for 5 years and not been able to put a name to. They were the gold that had walked down the aisle of the White Hall at the wrong feast in the wrong cloak and bowed over my wrist like it was a holy thing. Because some bonds, he said, are older than memory. Some bonds, Omega, are older than the people they are written into. You can take a man's name out of a woman's head. You cannot take her out of his bones. He pressed my palm against his cheek. I would have remembered you in a snowbank. I would have remembered you on the wrong end of a sword. I would have remembered you with my last breath in the dark of any cellar they ever built. They told me to forget you, my love. I didn't have the equipment for it. I cried. I cried because I had spent 5 years feeling like a thing instead of a person, and because in the space of 1 week he had given me back my name and my wolf and my kingdom and my body and my own face in a mirror. I cried because the bond between us, as I cried, hummed warm and bright and awake, and I could feel him crying with me through it as if our chests were a single room. He held me. He held me until the crying stopped, and then a little longer, because crying does not always stop the way one thinks it will. Outside, the kingdom was waking up. Chapter 28. Long live the Beast King. Kale. We were crowned together. It was Selah's idea. A king without his queen is half a story, child, she had said, and no one had argued, and Lyra had laughed and said, fine, Selah, I will wear the silly circlet, you are a tyrant, and Selah had cackled, and the matter had been settled. We did it on the steps of the White Hall, in the open, where the people could see. The same hall where Cedric had stood her up beside him a week before and asked her, in his beautiful careful voice, whether she took him as her alpha. The same dais. The same moon. Different crown. The crown of the Banished was small and dark. It had been beaten out of the iron of the chains the crop-eared wolves had worn in the cellars of Stonefell. Old Selah had melted them down herself. There were no jewels. There was a single thin band of gold around it, and on the front of the band, an opening crescent moon. I knelt for it. A king, on the day of his crowning, kneels to the people, not the other way around. My father had taught me that, when I was 8, in the stable yard, while shoeing a horse. Lyra knelt beside me. The lords behind us, the ones who had survived Stonefell, the ones who had come back to themselves in time, stood in 2 long rows. The Banished court stood in 2 long rows opposite them. 300 ruined faces and 100 court faces, mixed now, after a week, into something that was beginning to be a kingdom again. Selah laid the crown on my head. She laid the smaller one, a thin circlet of beaten silver, with a single grey stone the color of Lyra's wolf, on Lyra's. We rose. I turned us to face the people. I was a prince, I said. I did not say it loud. The White Hall did not need loud anymore. I was banished. I was made to forget that I was ever a prince. I was told that my queen was dead. I was told that my kingdom was dead. I was told that my line was dead. None of those things were true. Some of you knew. Most of you did not. I am not here to punish the not knowing. I am here to begin again. A long silence. Then a woman in the front row, small, gray-haired, a brand on her neck, said, very clearly, "Long live the Beast King." The crowd took it up. It went out across the White Hall, out across the courtyard, out across the kingdom, all the way to the eastern ridge where, 5 years ago, a man on a horse had stood with 300 ruined faces at his back and looked down at a sleeping kingdom and said, very quietly, "I am coming home." That night a rider came in from the north. He was bloody. He had ridden 2 horses to death. He was 12 years old. He fell off his last horse in front of the steps of the White Hall and Ash caught him before he hit the stones. "My Lord Beast King," he said. His mouth was full of blood and he was trying very hard to deliver his message before he passed out. "My lord, the Black Pack. Beyond the northern pass. They are stirring. They have a queen. She wears a crown of bone. She says she is your sister, my lord." I went very still. Lyra's hand closed on mine. My sister is dead, I said. They say, the boy's eyes were fluttering, they say she is not. They say she has been waiting. They say she is coming for the blood moon throne. He fainted. Ash carried him away. Selah went after them with her bag. Lyra and I stood on the steps of the White Hall in our small dark crowns, and the wind off the eastern ridge came down and lifted her hair, and somewhere far inside me, my wolf put his ears forward and listened to a sound I had not yet heard. Kale, she said. My queen. We have a problem. We have a book too, I said. She laughed. She laughed in spite of everything. She tucked her hand into the crook of my arm and she said, then we had better go inside and start preparing for it. We went inside. Behind us, the crown of the Banished, on the head of the king they had told to forget, caught the last of the blood moon light. It held it. It would hold it for a very long time. Acknowledgements. This book would not exist without the readers who have followed me from one moonlit kingdom to the next, who have whispered the names of these characters to their friends, and who have asked, again and again, for the kind of stories where the ones the world tries to forget get up anyway and walk home. To my family, who have given me the quiet hours in which to write about loud, impossible nights, thank you. To the friends who read early drafts and told me the truth, even when the truth was cut this scene, you can do better, thank you. To the writers who came before me in this corner of fantasy and showed me that wolves and crowns and stolen omegas could carry the weight of a real story, I am grateful for the trail. And to anyone reading this who has ever been told to forget themselves, who has ever been buried, banished, bound, or quietly erased, this book is for you. The bond underneath is older than the stone they put over it. You can dig it back up. You are allowed. Kamsi Arthur. About the author. Kamsi Arthur is a passionate storyteller who creates immersive fiction filled with suspense, emotion, and powerful characters. With a love for crafting intense worlds and unforgettable journeys, he focuses on stories that explore strength, identity, and the hidden power within. His writing blends gripping action with deep emotional moments, keeping readers hooked from beginning to end. Through his books, Kamsi aims to inspire readers to believe in resilience, growth, and the courage to rise, even when everything seems lost. When he's not writing, he enjoys developing creative projects and building ideas that connect with people around the world.